All right, enough of the whole U.S. national team nonsense. Okay, I'm going to try and put myself in a better mood here talking about something I haven't been able to talk about yet. And that's the fact that I get to meet a bunch of you guys on Sunday. I am officially in Amsterdam for TwitchCon. I've got my badge and everything. I'm posted up. Amsterdam and Rotterdam. I got lost. In my defense, the Netherlands is like 20 minutes wide, so it's really not that bad. I had to fly into Amsterdam anyways. But I am in Europe, and I've got a meet and greet Sunday morning, and I'm excited to see all y'all guys. It's going to be good fun. Going to have a good time. I'm trying to decide if I want to wear the mustache or not to the meet and greet. So let me know what kind of facial hair assembly you would prefer. That's not the right word. Anyways, but instead of spending time out enjoying the beautiful sights and sounds of Rotterdam, maybe taking a little cruise down the river, I'm in my hotel room because I wanted to talk to you about Georgia. Georgia, not the state, but the country. Because international tournaments always seem to provide us with a sign. A sign that maybe that one thing everybody was debating is not so much of a good idea. Georgia, in this situation, is that sign. Because the debate that I've been seeing people have is about whether 24 teams is the right number of teams for the Euro. People either want to go back to 16, so that you have to finish in the top two of your group to make it, or they want to go to 32, so that they just have more groups for everything. But I believe that Georgia is evidence of exactly how awesome the Euros is right now, and the fact that it should not change. Now, the World Cup changed, and don't get this twisted, because FIFA wanted more money, right? But I do believe the change from 32 to 48 teams was smart. There are a lot more teams trying to qualify for the World Cup than there were when they initially moved it to 32. 48 gives you the opportunity to have more teams like Georgia, which is exactly what we're looking for. Now, in Europe, there aren't a bunch of new teams trying to make it, so expanding to 32 doesn't make a lot of sense. People that are offended by finishing in the third place spot in the Euros and being able to make it through from third clearly weren't paying attention to the group where everybody tied on 4 points. You can still have awesome group stage matches. And in my opinion, group stages are typically better when the third place team is able to make it through, because then no matter what, there is a very dramatic final day in the group stage, right? Like there is just peak drama no matter what. You don't end up in those groups where it is pretty obvious who's going through by the time you get to the final day, where you might end up where one team is definitely guaranteed through on the final day and three teams are going to make it through out of the group thing. Like if you win your first two matches, you're basically already going to be going through. But that third place is always up for grabs, so there's always some drama going on. But the reason that I'm highlighting Georgia specifically with this, and don't worry, we're going to get to the part where we just glaze Georgia for like 5 minutes, is because I feel like 24 gives you this perfect amount where new teams can be in there. There is an amazing record in the Euros. It's true. You can look it up. That every single European championship, there's been a debutant. That means in every single tournament, there's been at least one team that's never been there before. Georgia, of course, being the one example of a team that has never been to the European Championships before that was able to actually make it in this time. And I think that nothing makes a tournament more special than having one country, at least, that people can look at and go, wow, that's cool. It's the first time they made it. Now, obviously, the first expansion of the 48-team World Cup, we're probably going to have a couple of teams that make it for the first time ever. And that is just such a unique, cool experience. I remember the first World Cup that I ever watched. Right, it's in America. It took me a while to get into the sport. Right, the first World Cup I ever watched, I think it was maybe 2010, and it was Togo. That might have been in 2006. I can't remember, but Togo made it. And I didn't even know where Togo was. At the age that I was at the time, I thought Togo was some island in the Pacific, right? I had no idea that it was a West African country, right? I heard the name and I was like, oh, Fiji? For some reason, they just always linked that with a water bottle in my mind. But I got to see Togo. I got to experience this Togolese national team for the first time. And now the Euros, Europe and the world's kind of getting to experience watching Georgia for the first time. But it's not just the experience. It's not just having that one awesome person to root for. It is also giving a stage to a nation for the first time, right? And you can debate whether a nation deserves a stage or not. But if you come from a country like England, France, Italy, Germany, Portugal, the United States, Brazil, Argentina, if you are from one of those countries, even like Japan, Australia, these countries, no matter what competition is going on, they are always in the limelight. If you're watching the Olympics, there's probably somebody from your country competing in that sport somewhere. Right? If you're watching the World Cup, your team's basically always there, unless you're Italy or us. Right? If you're watching anything else, any other sort of international competition that I'm not thinking of. Hell, even cricket, apparently, for the United States now. Your nation's going to be represented, right? If you're talking, if you're watching the news, it's going to be about your country, right? There's going to be prescient stuff happening in your country that you're going to be paying attention to. But for countries like Georgia, right, this is something I never really thought about until I went to Iceland right before they were going to the World Cup. And I believe it was 2018. And I was there, and I was just in a shop in a small town because we were we were getting out of the major cities. And I was buying a jersey, basically. So that's how we ended up talking about it. Just talking about, what did you think you'd ever be able to make the World Cup? And obviously it's talking about, well, obviously no, our national team's terrible for a long time and so on and so forth. But what he said to me just really shifted my view on how all of this works, not from my perspective, because my perspective initially was what I already told you. Oh, Togo, awesome. Let me root for Togo, and this is cool, and I'm going to learn all about Togo. But from their perspective, which is, he just went, Iceland's never really been, we've never really competed. Like, I've never been able to watch a major tournament in anything and actually root for my country. And you just go, oh, that is awesome. And you can see how that just changes your whole belief, your whole perspective on, if you're Icelandic and you grow up in Iceland now, you believe. You are training and working to get to a point where you can take Iceland back to the World Cup, right? Like, it's possible already. You've seen it done before. And if you were growing up in Georgia until right now, that did not seem particularly possible. It was just like Azerbaijan or Armenia, right? And I know if you're from any of those three places, you're going to absolutely loathe me for comparing them, but you can't argue with the fact that 15 years ago, those three national team setups were very similar, right? But Georgia was able to build a team that was able to make the Euros. And now if you are growing up in Georgia, not Atlanta, Georgia, but sorry, I couldn't help myself with one. But in Georgia, and you're looking at that and you're going, we're represented. We're on the big stage, right? This is us. We just played Portugal, right? This kind of mind-bending. There are 10 more Kvisha Kvaratskhelia, right? There will never be another Kvisha Kvaratskhelia. You always remember your first kind of superstar, right? Freddie Adu, obviously. But Kvisha Kvaratskhelia, there's 10 more kids that could be as good as Kvisha Kvaratskhelia that are looking at this and going, wow, we can do that, right? You see your country on the big stage. You get that experience. And so having a tournament that's big enough to have these types of teams make it, when they deserve it, though, not gifting them that spot for free, not making the World Cup 64 teams, not making the Euros include more than half of all European teams trying to qualify, but when they earn it, when they've got a good generation, when they're able to get on that stage and get on a field with Portugal and not only not get embarrassed, but win, then it can make such a huge difference. And it's really kind of what the sport, to me, it's what the sport's all about, right? Because I've long been on the record as I just hate overdogs, right? Like, I hate teams that are the favorites, right? I love rooting for underdogs, and I will always love rooting for and hoping that the underdog wins, except for when it's Panama against the United States, and then I will loathe it. But the Euros doesn't need to change. The World Cup doesn't need to change after it expands to 48. And 3 teams getting out of a group is not the end of the world. It creates fantastic drama. But to Georgia and Portugal, my God, there's a couple of takeaways I had from this. One, right, Georgia's pretty good. Okay, it is not just Kvisha Kvaratskhelia, Mamardashvili in goal, and vibes, right? Because they've got the leader in the Golden Boot, Mikotadze or whatever. That dude plays in France at a high level. Now, I mentioned this in the preview. Now, in a lot of things I said in the preview were super wrong, from the Croatia's this dark horse to win the tournament and everything. So I'm not some savant here, right? But in the preview, I talked about how if you look at the Georgian team, there are more people there than just the people you think of, right? Where when the old Armenian teams, you're looking at it and you were like, it is literally Henrik Mkhitaryan and 10 pieces of wood. And unfortunately, he's not Zinedine Zidane, so he couldn't win the Champions League that way. If you don't remember the quote, please don't. That wasn't me being an American, I promise. But this team, this Georgian team, is a lot more than Kvisha Kvaratskhelia and 10 pieces of wood. We knew that going in. Now, would anybody in their right mind have predicted that they could go in and beat Portugal? No, obviously. Of course not. But it is important to remember, Portugal does this every tournament. Okay, Portugal won the Euros in 2016 after finishing 3rd in their group. Right, you look at Portugal going into the World Cup. Who do they lose to? Morocco, right? Like, Portugal has this switch where it just switches off and it's going to play one game where it looks like Manchester City when Manchester City loses, where they create nothing, they have a lot of the ball, in a beautiful looking tactical structure and a couple of lovely passes, showing off their technical quality, and then they lose, right? And Portugal's just going to do that every time. And I think that Portugal's actually in more danger than this result would even indicate, right? Portugal is going into the hard side of the bracket, right? And that is going to make things complicated. Now, Portugal should be able to get to the quarterfinal. They're playing against Slovenia, which I would kind of go on the record and say Slovenia is even worse than Georgia based off of what we've kind of seen so far. Slovenia's a tough freaking team physically, right? So they could totally give Portugal. I guess, why am I saying that? Like, Portugal already lost to Georgia, but it would be easy to say that Portugal was already through, so who cares, right? But the Roberto Martinez has this issue. Its name's Cristiano Ronaldo. Where Cristiano Ronaldo, I saw a tweet, and I think this summed it up perfectly. Cristiano Ronaldo is unaware of his own regression. He acts and carries himself throughout the tournament like he's still a god, and he's not. He's mortal now. And again, there's no problem with that. He's one of the 4 best players ever, in my opinion. He's one of the 4 best players ever, but he's 39, right? Like, and I don't care how much, self-wellness stuff you're doing. At 39, you're not the god anymore, right? He's not 15 feet in the air biking it in from 30 yards out. But Roberto Martinez has fed into that ego, right? When he took over, I was begging him to try and make Cristiano Ronaldo a super sub, to go, hey, take on the Didier Drogba role at the World Cup. You are the spirit animal of this team. You come in for the last 15 minutes, everybody gets really fired up because you're in the game, and then maybe you're actually able to go score a goal, right? But Roberto Martinez takes over the Portugal job, immediately starts glazing Cristiano Ronaldo, like doing 360s on it, talking about, like, and then he has not set expectations appropriately. Now, I've interviewed real-life managers, right? And one of the best things I ever heard is, like, what's the key to being a good manager? And he didn't talk about tactics or anything else. He said setting expectations, so that nobody gets upset. Tell them exactly what you're thinking, set their expectations. And I don't think Roberto Martinez has done a good job of that. But now he's running into the same issue that the previous manager is running into, which is Cristiano Ronaldo playing every second of every game is just not the best option for Portugal at this point. I think that is the sort of thing that could sink them in this tournament. But Portugal has 9 lives. They're not dead yet. I've seen them do crazier things. Now, Georgia, on the other hand, they probably are. Now, you're not going to get me making a pick for Georgia to go through, but that celebration, I'm going to see if I can play it and not get DMCA'd here. This celebration is just magic. Brother, that's what it's all about. That right there. Like, Georgia's not going to this tournament to win the whole thing. I can't remember. I think I talked about this on the Zealandism recently, but the vast majority of these teams, United States included, when it shows up to Copa America or to the World Cup, we're not going to win the whole thing. We know that if you simulated it 100 times, we might win once, right? We're going to any tournament to have a moment like that. One moment. Like, we're going to the World Cup just to have a John Brooks for the USA moment. That one moment where everything else fades and you're just sprinting around your house and you're happy for days afterwards. And Georgia finally, for the first time, actually got that moment on the big stage. You never take it away. That's they beat Portugal at the Euros. Full stop, period, end of sentence. And congratulations to them. And validation for the way that the Euros is done. I don't want to hear any more nonsense about the Euros not being all right. Okay.